Hello and welcome to the Book Club Review. I'm Kate.
I'm Laura.
And this is the podcast about book clubs and the books that get people talking. After a run of themed episodes, we're back to our book club roots with two very different novels. Laura's book club has been reading The Book of Love, the first novel from acclaimed American short story virtuoso and Pulitzer Prize finalist Kelly Link. What's it about? In a seemingly ordinary coastal town, three teenagers become pawns in a supernatural power struggle. Vulture magazine named it the escapist masterpiece of the year. But what did Laura's book club think?
Meanwhile, Kate's book club have been reading Elaine Dundy's The Dud Avocado, a fizzing, exuberant novel from 1958 about a young American woman let loose in Paris, determined to live life on her own terms. It gained instant cult status on first publication and remains a timeless portrait of a woman hell-bent on living. A book that feels bracingly modern despite being nearly 70 years old.
But did these two very different novels make for good book club reads? Keep listening to find out.
Plus, we're catching up on our recent reading and the books we're looking forward to next.
That's all coming up here on the Book Club Review. Book club. It's my happy space right now more than ever. Don't know about you.
I've formed another one at work. I'm in a novella club now.
Great. The more the better. Bring them on, bring them on.
Yeah.
But before we get into our book club reads, Laura, what have you been reading recently?
I finally got around to reading Slow Days, Fast Company by Eve Babbitt, which I picked up at the Paper Hound, 12 months ago. Whenever I go in there, I feel like I should get a book, right? And so I picked it up, but it wasn't really something I felt like reading at the time.
We should tell any listeners who don't know why we both think this bookshop is so special. It's just the most wonderful secondhand bookshop in Vancouver, and it's run by the coolest people.
The coolest, friendliest, while being totally reticent booksellers, people. It's primarily secondhand, but very curated. And then they have some new books, including this one, which was part of the New York Review books, the reprints they do, the NYRB series.
Yeah.
And then they have a very curated list of new literary releases. But I had never read Eve Babbitt's, and I only picked it up because I was on a run of reading short novels. And also it was in my bedside book stack, which keeps growing and is becoming a bit of an issue. I really loved it. Have you read Eve Babbitt's?
A funny coincidence, because I've been reading Didion and Babbitt's by Lily Enolik, which is her almost like dual biography of the two women. And she discovered this incredible archive, this amazing treasure trove of letters and paperwork that Babbitt's had left. And in it was this quite extensive correspondence between Eve Babbitt's and Joan Didion, because the two women were contemporaries. They were both very much in the literary world. Quite a rivalrous friendship, I think would be the way to describe it. But so what's really interesting about it is it's certainly with Joan Didion, and I didn't know much about Babbitt's, but it's a really interesting portrait of someone that we know a lot about, seen from a very interesting perspective and vice versa. So that's what's interesting about it.
I have been to LA, really didn't like it. I was fine, but I was, gosh, I'm never going to come back here. And what Eve Babbitt has done is transform LA in my mind. It does this magical, hot, smoggy place with things always happening and bubbling up on the streets as you move from one place to another. Really enjoyed it. It's quite slim. I will read more by her, and now I'm quite intrigued to read Joan Didion, who I have never read, surprisingly.
That is surprising. I feel like we're going to come back to larger-than-life party girl sucking the marrow from the bones of life when we get on to Elaine Dundy. But just one little bit of follow-up correspondence I have for you. After we did our bestsellers episode, in which we talked about a number of books on the bestseller list, one of which was Project Hail Mary. As anyone will know who listened to that episode, but if you didn't, here was the problem, was that we basically were so innovated by the various bestsellers that we'd read that left us feeling really flat and despairing about reading. By the time you got to Project Hail Mary, I think it's fair to say you just weren't in the mood. And so at the time, you were a bit dismissive of it.
I'd had enough.
Yeah, you were just not really going to go with it at all. Anyway, a listener heard that episode and wrote in, Ilsa O'Brien from Massachusetts, and she said, "Hello, Kate, Laura, and Phil. I very much enjoy your podcast, and this is the first time I've written in. I'm a literacy specialist and educator of 26 years and a parent of 2 teenagers. I'm a wide reader, mainly of literary fiction, historical fiction, and non-fiction. And I'm also not generally a fan of bestseller books. I've gotten some great recommendations from your podcast. But I have to disagree with your assessment of Project Hail Mary, Laura. I wish you had read this book first. While there are certainly some contrivances in the plot and some of the science gets specific and complex, I don't think it was poorly written or boring at all. I had the same initial feeling or wondering why Ryland Grace was chosen for this mission, but I have to point out that he wasn't recruited initially to be the one. He was asked to join the team as a consultant because of his previous research. Later, after an explosion that killed 2 astronauts, he was recruited because he was resistant to the side effects of the coma drug. Still a bit of a contrivance, but not an outright cop-out or totally unrealistic plot device. You said, I want to spend time with authors who are way smarter than me so that I can feel stimulated. I really think this book does that. I thought it was actually quite moving as it explored themes of isolation and friendship and loss. It was propulsive and entertaining. I strongly recommend the audio. It's a fantastic narrative performance by Ray Porter, who nails the humour and sarcasm. And on the note you brought up about dropping literacy rates, my son read and loved this book after I recommended it to him almost 2 years ago when he was 15. It remains one of his favourite books. This led him to other science fiction like The Martian and Recursion, but he also reads widely. Some of his favourites include non-fiction, Educated, and Until the End of Time, and required reading like The Great Gatsby and Hamlet. He's a reader who struggled with dyslexia, particularly when he was in elementary school. So to have a book like Project Hail Mary inspire him to read more and still remain his favourite book is a godsend. I do hope others will give it a try. Thanks for all your discussions and recommendations. Ilsa O'Brien of Massachusetts. I actually was intrigued enough by the clip that we played in of Project Hail Mary to want to give that a go. And then I had this email from Ilsa and I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a listen. I cannot tell you how much I loved Project Hail Mary. I have had the best time these past 3 weeks on various car journeys, listening to Ray Porter, who I'm completely in love with, reading this fantastic, page-turning, incredibly plot-driven narrative with all kinds of twists and turns. It's such a lot of fun. And I love the way it genuinely leaves you feeling really inspired about science and optimistic, that kind of scientific cast of mind. And there's also something very much about, he's in these terrible straits, our stranded biologist up there in space. And there's just something about the fact that he just does one thing at a time, and he does the one thing he can do in every situation. That somehow I felt really spoke to this current time where we all feel so overwhelmed by everything that's going on and so powerless at the enormity of things that are happening in the world. And there's something about this methodical, okay, I'll figure this out, and then I'll figure this out, and then I'll see if I can, that I just loved. And I felt like it really resonated beyond the fact that it was a fun sci-fi novel. So I too, with Ilsa, would strongly urge you to give it a try. And anyone out there, I just thought it was great. I had a really good time.
I will line it up on Libby and absolutely listen to the audiobook. And I so appreciated Ilsa's graciousness in her email, because unlike my parents who just, whenever I come up with opinions, even if they're grounded opinions, unlike in this case where there's ungrounded, cranky opinions, my parents are always like, be nice. Just be nice, Laura, which is very Canadian. Ilsa was just more, I understand what you're saying, but you might want to think again because you're quite wrong, which is very much in the book club spirit. So thank you, Ilsa.
Exactly. And if you're listening and feel the urge to correspond about this or any other book we've discussed on the show, then drop us a line anytime at bookclubreview@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. The Book of Love by Kelly Link, national bestseller in the US, winner of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, finalist for the Nebula Award, longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, one of Vulture and Publishers Weekly's 10 Best Books of the Year, a Best Book of the Year for the New York Times Book Review, NPR, The New Yorker, Time, Town and Country, Esquire, Harper's Bazaar, New York Post, Book Riot, Lit Hub. Imagine a ring of David Mitchell and Stephen King books dancing around a fire until something new, brave, and wonderful rose up from the flames, said Isaac Fitzgerald in Today. Laura, this book sounds incredible. Is all this praise the reason that your book club came to choose it?
Yes and no. The reason my book club came to choose it is because I had picked up a copy at Elliott Bay Bookshop because they had their little tag recommending it. And then, of course, I did pick up the book thanks to the tag and saw on the front that it was one of the New York Times notable books of the year. And I really rate their selections. And I love a bit of sci-fi. I love a bit of magic. It sounds super fun. So my book club chooses the next book at the end of our book club session. So it is really quite a bit of a cycle. And I said, look, I have this book on my bedside table, The Book of Love by Kelly Link. Would you guys be interested? So they all Googled it then and there. We're like, oh, yeah, this sounds fun. And then we read it. More on that to come.
Yeah. It's quite a long book, isn't it? It's
625
Yeah, 625 pages. Okay,
And
what's it about?
Late one night, Laura, Daniel, and Mo find themselves beneath the fluorescent lights of a high school classroom, almost a year after disappearing from their hometown, the small seaside community of Love's End, Massachusetts, having long been presumed dead, which, in fact, they are. With them in the room is their previously unremarkable high school music teacher, who seems to know something about their disappearance and what has brought them back again. Desperate to reclaim their lives, the three agree to the terms of the bargain their music teacher proposes. They will be given a series of magical tasks. While they undertake them, they may return to their families and friends, but they can tell no one where they've been. In the end, there will be winners and there will be losers. But their resurrection has attracted the notice of other supernatural figures, all with their own agendas. As Laura, Daniel, and Mo grapple with the pieces of the lives they left behind, and Laura's sister Susanna attempts to reconcile what she remembers with what she fears, these mysterious others begin to arrive, engulfing their community in danger and chaos. And it becomes imperative that the teens solve the mystery of their deaths to avert a looming disaster.
The audiobook is read by January Lavoie and published by Head of Zeus. Here's a clip.
Susanna stands at Laura's window. Across the lawn is Daniel's house, the yellow rectangle of Daniel's window, a light on in Daniel's room. Does his mother sit there when she can't sleep? Susanna picks up her sister's old Harmony Sovereign Marvel Tone acoustic and runs her hand down the neck. Laura, Susanna says, come back. You should come back, or else I'll do something terrible. I need you to come back. She waits for an answer. Gets none. Actually, this is typical of Laura, who believed in the silent treatment. So, Susanna thinks, let's be typical. She's tried so hard to be good the last few months. Has anyone even noticed? If Daniel were here, he would have noticed. Mo would have noticed, even if he didn't say anything. She's pretty fucking sure Laura would have noticed. If Daniel were here, he would help her figure out how to live without Laura. If Laura were here, she and Susanna could figure out together how to live without Daniel. But it's only Susanna. It will only ever be Susanna again, which means that Susanna can't be Susanna. She doesn't know how.
So it's got a small town vibe. We've got our teenagers. We've got our mysterious happenings. Post Stranger Things, this all feels exactly like what we're generally in the mood for. How did your book club get on with it?
It did seem like the perfect holiday book. And I dove straight into it, and I loved maybe the first 50 pages, maybe the first 100. And then I started to go, this is very strange. This is a very strange novel. One of the critics compare it to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I have not watched in probably 20 years, which, to be clear, did not put me off at all. I was like, great, sounds super. And it's critically acclaimed, fantastic. But there is something of that, is that it doesn't make sense, Kate. And this actually was my biggest problem with it. The magic system and even the story and the characters in it, not the human characters, but the supernatural characters, are completely arbitrary, totally divorced from any magical tradition. It's like Kelly Link's just, yes, I'm going to do this now. Yes, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to do this now. But as soon as you just start approaching magic as if it is arbitrary and just there, because one of the first tasks is that these 3 teenagers need to use magic. That sounds like a great task. How are they going to do that? By what mechanism are they going to be able to do magic? And it turns out they can just do it. They just have to think and then they can do it. Anything can be changed in an instant by magic. There's no rules to it. And I think that really bothered me. Now, that probably would have bothered me whatever, but it is also very long. And this was a book club complaint because it is structured in chapters for each of the main characters. So you have the Book of Laura, or a sequence of chapters, and then you have the Book of Mo, which is a sequence of chapters, and the Book of Daniel, and then indeed, yes, the Book of Susanna and other minor characters. You're often told the same events and the same sequence events from different points of view. So it becomes very plodding. And then all of this is also just wrapped up in superficial, sometimes petty, but just like middle-class American teenage chat that thinks it's far more clever than it is, and which, again, might not have bothered me if there weren't 650 pages of it. A key thread in this was, who is this for? Because the critics seem to praise it out of hand as if it's just an exceptional novel full stop, where our point of view is, no, this is like YA at best. Coming back to the Buffy the Vampire point. And some harrowing things happen in this book in terms of loss. But similar to Buffy the Vampire Slayer or any sort of YA novel or teen drama on TV, characters just slide over it. Like, oh, that death happened? Yeah, we'll just slide on to the next thing. We're not going to really linger or be too traumatized by it. I don't know, Kate, if you've had this experience in recent history, or our listeners, if you've had this before, but you know when you choose a book and you're like, oh no, I have chosen this book for my book club and they are going to hate it. And Kate,
Your book club.
Kate, they hated it. Those who finished it hated it, and those who didn't finish it for a reason. They're not necessarily put off by a long book.
So the makeup of your book club, I know you've got Phil and he's American, but is everybody else in your book club English?
No, Caitlin is Canadian, although she's been a long time.
But
in,
any other
the
Americans?
UK. No.
Because one of the things that I really liked, but which I think is not so obvious to an English reader, and I spent a year in America and I lived in a small town when I was there. And I think there's a thread of appreciation for and nostalgia for the small American town that for me, I thought was very evocative and very beautifully conveyed. But it's tapping into a cultural resonance and a shared memory that I think might be a little bit alienating for English readers because that's not our experience. And I wondered whether that might be partly why there was this feeling of disconnect.
I don't think so. It's not very good, Kate.
Well, I don't agree. I am about just under halfway through. And I love it. I think it's great. I am really luxuriating in it. I'm enjoying it so much. I think one of the things that is interesting is that I've had a run of books recently that we've done for book club, for the Patreon book club. And these books have not been plot-driven books. And it's interesting as well, this contrast where in the background I've had Project Hail Mary, which is the most unbelievably plot-driven book ticking away. That's been something I've been listening to. But when I've been reading these books that are very much about single character narratives, internal monologues, inward journeys, mood, beautiful description, but they're not really about plot and they're not about events. And in order to appreciate those books, I had to switch off that part of my brain that's like hungry for plot, that wants to know what's going to happen next. You had to really dial that down, I found. And actually, I had this revelation, like a slight epiphany. I was just like, wow, does plot just get in the way of reading? Is plot actually a distraction? Maybe plot isn't good. Maybe it's better if you don't have plot. All completely new thoughts to me. And I think coming to this book with that mindset, one of the things, especially if you're used to reading fantasy, is that it almost teases you with the idea that it's going to be quite structured. These characters have been brought back from the dead. There's some mysterious bargain going on between the forces that have returned them to the living. And they are going to have to fulfill these tasks in order to find out if they get to stay or if they get sent back. And that sounds very structured, doesn't it? They're going to have to do a thing and learn a thing and prove a thing, and then they're going to be allowed to stay. And in fact, at that point, it's almost like she loses all interest in that agenda.
Yes.
And it becomes very meandering and discursive. And although it never quite loses the thread of what's going on, it's not plotty in that way.
You're so right. By the time you find out how they died and where they died, it's basically irrelevant. Like
I
things
could see that.
you've completely moved on.
Yeah. But you know what? The interesting reference, I also was thinking about Buffy, which I loved and was deeply steeped in. I was a huge Buffy fan. And interestingly, before I ever watched an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer on TV, I found the scripts of Buffy online and I used to read them at work. This is early days of the internet. They had these things called the shooting scripts. They were all online. And I basically read Buffy before I ever watched them in real
That is
life.
a very unique experience, Kate.
But so classic me, right? Like just to come to it, like reading it. Anyway, Buffy, again, like very plot driven, very eventful, and also quite binary in terms of like good and evil and, you know, whose side you're on. There's one episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where a main character dies. And if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil which one, but a character you really care about, an important central character dies. And the whole episode is very different from all the other Buffy episodes you've ever seen. It's just shot very differently. It's completely different the way it's done. It is such a powerful evocation of loss through this absence. It's hard to describe. I was thinking about it. I couldn't even articulate how they did it. I just remember how powerful it was and how extraordinary. I just thought it was the most incredible episode. And I felt like this book had that kind of a mood to it. There's something about this book. It's quite different from any other fantasy you might have read. And there's something it's like evoking something, but it's like more of a mood or an emotion.
It is George Saunders adjacent. Like
Yes.
there is an uncanny thread
Yes.
to her writing, and I think that is much more pronounced and successful in her short stories. I don't think Phil had read her short stories before book club, but then he read this, and memorably in the chat he says, one of the magic qualities of this book is that it does not end. So he read this and was very bogged down and not very interested. And then he was like, but this writer has so many fans, right? Like the praise at the beginning goes on for 4 pages. Why? And then he went and read her short stories, or at least one collection, and he said they were exquisite, they were incredible. To which Caitlin said she really believes at this point that there are short story writers and there are novelists. And most writers aren't any good at both, very few. And that would be my sense with Kelly Link. The tone was there. Even the characters were there, but there was just an uneven, unfocused bagginess to it that became very tedious, not least spending so much time with teenagers. Dear friend Frances Ambler, who has a Substack listeners where she sets out everything she read in the previous month, highly recommend it. Frances Ambler, Ambler. I was really quite excited because I thought she might let rip about the Book of Love in the Substack. She's much more, I think, understated than that, a bit more grown up perhaps than I am being. She describes it and then she says, and basically it was frustrating. The pacing is weird, you learn the same things on repeat, and it took a lot of effort to get through. It's 672 pages. One of the group had read, this is Phil, Link's short stories. This is her first novel and raved about them. So maybe this just isn't her format.
I pulled this out because I thought this was quite a good example. When the children were gone, Anabin, who is almost like I was thinking of Neil Gaiman's books where it's about gods who walk the earth. It's almost that kind of vibe, and you don't know whether this one is a force for good or for evil, really. It's not clear. Anyway, his name's Anabin, and he's the music teacher, it turns out, at the local high school. When the children were gone, Anabin remained seated before the piano. The day was warm and the room was sunny, and he had no particular place he was required to be. He lifted the piano lid and began to pick out, with one finger, a song. There were so many songs. This one, like many others, had been forgotten. He played it, fairly certain as he did so that he was unintentionally remaking it. And so the song he was playing, could it even be said to be the same song? There were only one or two besides Anabin who would have the knowledge to correct him where he substituted one note for another. It was not a song that had been meant for a piano. There had been words as well as a melody. He did not sing the lyrics, though those he remembered. It had been a song meant to summon a lover. Anabin played all the way through and then began it again. No one else was in the room. No one came into the room as he picked out the melody, meandering, cajoling, never resolving. There was only Anabin and the piano and the window where the broken glass was beginning to fit itself together again. And it's, if you could put up with that, you know, this kind of like meandering, where is this paragraph going? I'm not really sure it's going anywhere. Oh, oh, there's a bit of magic there. Like, that is this book, but I love that. I'm like happy reading that. I was like, yes, great.
I have my own quote for you. So this is a conversation. I can't even figure it out because the entire chapter is just dialogue back and forth, almost effectively a script. I think it's Susanna and another character who has come back from the dead with the other three, who we only learn more about, who has taken on the name Bowie because there was a David Bowie poster in the music room when they arrived. But Bowie is responding to Susanna's question about Mallow Mogg. Isn't Mallow Mogg the woman Thomas works for? And Bowie replies, yes, Mallow Mogg is the moon. She is the mistress Thomas serves. Bogomil and Annabin are terrible, but she is worse. All the time I spent upon the threshold in the darkness with Bogomil, I listened to him, his stories. I listened when he did not know who or what I was. I learned much of Mallow Mogg and what she is. I forgot myself, but I did not forget the things he said. That's all we're ever given about Mallow Mogg. She is the moon. Because she's also like the mistress of the dead. And also, just to go back to Neil Gaiman's American Gods is the pantheon of the gods, like rooted in deep myth and legend and human consciousness. In this case, there's no... Don't want to give too many spoilers, but Mallow Mogg is effectively, she's effectively a one-off. So you're like, what is she even doing here? Why does she exist? You'd think I don't read fantasy because of these complaints, whereas the opposite is true. I read a huge amount of fantasy, and there's just something annoying, I think, to me, and maybe this is because I read fantasy, that she's dabbling in magic without giving it enough respect. I don't know. I don't know, Kate.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to expectations and almost the book not easily fitting into a known mold. You said Saunders. That's an interesting point of reference. There's a peculiar, slightly subversive quality to it. And then someone referenced Our Town, which is a classic small town Americana. I feel like all that's in there as well. And I actually think the dialogue is very snappy and very fun. And I love things like Susanna, the sister, she works at this coffee shop. And there's just this brilliant bit about how the owner of the coffee shop has like really carefully contrived things because he doesn't want people to linger. So everything is just a little bit off kilter and the seats are uncomfortable and the lighting is slightly too harsh. And it felt very real to me. It felt like a real place that I could imagine walking into.
I wouldn't want listeners to think that I don't like Kelly Link's writing, or that I wouldn't want to spend more time with her in a different book, because that's not true. I think she is a really great writer. And you're talking about loss and death, and this is why I liked the beginning, as well as having this setup, this very intriguing fantasy setup with tasks and magic. You have Susanna, and she's almost the main character, in fact. And she has been grieving her sister and her boyfriend, or almost boyfriend, for a year. And then they return, and we haven't mentioned this, but her memory and everyone else's memory is wiped. So suddenly they believe that the three who have been dead have in fact been in, I think, Ireland on a music retreat.
Yeah.
And yet Susanna, she is overwhelmed by grief still. The emotion is still there. And the depiction of that loss is really powerful and special. I just found it uneven. And okay, so here's the thing. Kelly Link, she could not be more embedded in the literary world, not just the fantasy world.
I also noticed she's a bookshop owner.
She's a bookshop owner. She's been a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction. She's the co-founder of Small Beer Press. She co-edits the occasional zine. It also said, I think she co-edited a collection of fantasy and sci-fi. I was just looking at her publishing list. Yeah, she was the editor of the year's best fantasy and horror. And clearly she's an awesome person. And we talk about this, Kate. I just think that a lot of people praise this book because they love her and they have loved her past work and they're so excited that she's written a novel, even though it's not very good.
I didn't know anything about her and I hadn't read her before and I didn't have any expectations about this. Yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
You haven't finished it. When you finish it, you can append a footnote to an episode somewhere.
And report back. Yeah,
now that said, she's a very stubborn listener, so she may just be like, nope, I loved it to the bitter end.
That's not true at all, actually. And in fact, I think much depends on how an author wraps things up. I really think that can change your view of a book. It can really tip it one way or another. Even a slightly weaker book with a really strong ending can, I think, have a stronger impact on you maybe than one where maybe the writing was good but the ending just fizzled out. So yeah, no, I would be very open to, even at this point, it going either way. But yeah, I've just been surprised at how much I've been enjoying it. I'm just having such a nice time reading it. It is that thing about just this little corner I've maybe turned in the way I'm reading recently, where I'm not expecting anything, I'm not waiting for anything. I'm just enjoying the sentences and being in the moment of wherever I am on the page. And that actually is a very delightful way to read. And I feel like you could apply it to anything, really. Maybe it's not the book. Maybe it's my new reading superpower.
Maybe. Although you're in good company with the critics, and I will not begrudge you. If you end up very much enjoying this book, that will be one of the people in my book club orbit who really enjoyed it.
Hey listeners, Kate here. If you'd like more from the Book Club Review between shows, why not come and join us on Patreon? For a small monthly fee, you'll get all kinds of good things, from ad-free episodes of the pod to special episodes made only for subscribers. This month, Patreon's got to come behind the scenes with me at a very special bookshop, Hey Books, in San Diego, California. Listening to owner Matthew Hine talk about the way he loves to inspire his customers to talk books with each other completely inspired me.
When somebody asks me for my recommendation, I really try to ask the other stranger in the store what their recommendation is, and then see if I can just juice that interaction enough that they will talk to each other and I can melt away. It's like creating tiny little 5-minute book clubs among strangers.
And Patreons also get to listen to my catch-up with pod regular Phil Chafee to find out whether finishing Proust changed his life and his thoughts on some recent reads. Never mind Proust, turns out he's not a big fan of The Time Traveller's Wife.
Like Henry and Claire, if I met them at a dinner party, I'd give them a miss. They were just boring. They were boring people.
He's a librarian. He can take you to look at the Audubon Book of Birds in the off hours. Yeah. And she is an incredible artist. She makes these amazing things. I can't believe. And they know how to have a good time. They're always throwing lovely dinner parties and doing nice things. Wow. And on that, we will have to agree to differ. All that, plus we just finished our read-along of The Count of Monte Cristo. As a member, you'll have a say in what we read next. There's currently talk of tackling Moby Dick. At the higher tier, the book clubbers have just finished All My Precious Madness by Mark Bowles, one of the most rewarding books we've encountered so far. Next up is the recent novel by literary icon Ian McEwan, What We Can Know. Described by reviewer John Day in the FT as a McEwan Greatest Hits album, a carefully plotted literary novel with insightful characterization and the propulsive drive of a thriller. But what will our book club think? Join me and the other book clubbers over Zoom on the last Sunday of the month with a catch-up episode for anyone who can't make the live session. All that, plus our community chat groups where the recommendations fly thick and fast. You'll find all the details over at patreon.com/The Book Club Review. I would love to see you there. Right. Speaking of book clubs, let's get back to it and find out how Laura got on with Elaine Dundy's wisecracking heroine, Sally J. Gorse, inimitable heroine of The Dud Avocado. The Dud Avocado, a smart, funny classic about a young and beautiful American woman who moves to Paris determined to live life to the fullest. This came up when I had bibliotherapist Ella Bertude on the show a couple of episodes back. For anyone who didn't catch it, a bibliotherapist is someone who prescribes books for various psychological states you might be going through as part of everyday life, with the idea that fiction can help us explore and resolve things in a helpful, therapeutic way. Now, you, Laura, asked for something that would fill you with inspiration and bonhomie, I quote, for the year ahead. And here's why Ella thought The Dud Avocado would be a good fit.
A book to fill you with inspiration and bonhomie is The Dud Avocado by Elaine Dundy, which is a really great book, a classic in the States. I think it was written in the 1950s. And I'd never heard of it until I started doing bibliotherapy. And I met someone who said it was their favourite book. I then immediately read it and saw why. It's about a woman who goes to Paris. She's 22, and her uncle says to her, I'll fund you to be in Paris for the next couple of years. All you have to do is write to me and tell me your adventures. That's the premise of the book. And she goes to loads of parties, and she is a very effervescent person. She has lots of disastrous love affairs. She ill-advisedly dyes her hair pink, and she's just a young woman in Paris, making mistakes and having adventures. But there's something about the book that's incredibly joyous. And I think it's a perfect antidote to when you're feeling a bit excited about life, because it takes you back to being that age and finding everything exciting and having all these slightly random adventures and events which are beyond your control and surviving through them. So I think that would be my suggestion for Laura, to see her through.
Having heard this from Ella, I was pretty intrigued myself. And so I then suggested it to my Real World Book Club, which is another book club separate to the Patreon one, which we do over Zoom. So I've got this little group, which includes Phil and Sarah, familiar voices to listeners from the pod, and a couple of other people. And we met at Phil's house the other night over a giant bowl of guacamole to discuss it. But before we get to what the book club thought, I thought perhaps we should start with you, Laura. How did you get on with it? Did it fill you with joie de vivre and bonhomie?
No, that sounds critical from the off. Did it fill me with bonhomie? No, because I'm so far removed now from this point in time. Honestly, in some ways it made me feel my age, because I turned 40 last year, so I'll turn 41 this year. And we've talked about this, but you're at like the top of the hill and you're going to head down the other side, which
I feel like there's a lot of listeners out there who are saying, oh no, this is not the top of the hill. The top of the hill is to come.
And so looking back at someone in their 20s, I don't know, it almost fills you with a little bit of envy. Now, that said, Sally J. Gorse and I could not have been further apart in our 20s. And I did read the introduction by Rachel Cook, where she said that Elaine Dundy, in writing this character, thought about what she would do and then wrote the opposite. Although Elaine Dundy, I don't know if you've read about her life, but she was also an actress in Paris and London. And then she ended up being a writer when she had her first child. So there's some autobiographical element in there, but she wasn't doing the chaotic things that Sally J is doing. I think I like this book coming back to it now. There is also something in Rachel Cook's introduction where she says it's a little bit plotless, and that's true. It doesn't have a lot of structure. It's madcap and she's moving from one thing to another. The descriptions are quite light touch. You can't quite get your teeth into the sense of place, would be my takeaway. Or maybe it's just a little bit sketched out. I did like it a lot, but I wasn't drawn to it, if that makes sense. It's not a page turner per se. I didn't see the twist coming. I don't know how naive I am, because by the time you're like, oh yeah, that was signposted all the way through. And somehow I was just totally oblivious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say it's not really a plot-driven book. It's much more about atmosphere and almost capturing a certain scene than it is about events. But as you say, there is an element of plot to it that is revealed towards the end and then slightly makes you then recast some of the things that have happened along the way. And you're, oh, okay, you see how all the pieces lock together. So there is an underlying structure to it. But I think it's definitely true to say this book is much more about atmosphere, capturing all these little details, than it is about the overarching story, which is quite thin.
And I think once you've read it, and you know what to expect, you can go back and really just enjoy the zingers, the portraits of the types in Paris, which get called out from the very beginning in relation to the women. But then also it's very clear the men are also just playing up to type. Even in the 1950s, they're trying to recreate a Hemingway in Paris.
Yeah, it's incredibly atmospheric. You can really luxuriate in all these delicious descriptions of cafes and bars. At the time, I pulled out this line. It was true. The evening was swimming together into a great big shiny mother of pearl oyster shell floating off to infinity. But time was spreading itself out before me now instead of slipping away. She does have these moments. She has sometimes these really beautiful turns of phrase. And it's also full of really great one-liners. There's a lot of humor woven in there. And maybe it takes a little while to key into that, because at the beginning, you're just not quite sure what you're reading. You just don't really understand who this character is, why you should care about her. She seems incredibly shallow. She's funded by this trust fund, this very rich uncle that she has. So she doesn't have to worry about money. She's in Paris. She basically has to live life to the fullest, as Ella said, have adventures and then write home about them. But it's still quite low stakes. You feel like no matter what happens to her, she's got this cushion of financial support and the fact that she's American that is going to cover her in almost any eventuality. But towards the last part of the book, the action moves from Paris to a holiday home that she and some other friends have rented down in Biarritz. Is that how you say it? Biarritz?
Biarritz.
I never quite know. Tell it's not the circle I move in. Summering in Biarritz. But yeah, so they're down there and it's just classic. It rains relentlessly for the first week. And also she's very disillusioned because when she gets there, she finds out that the men expected that she and the other woman would be the ones who'd be doing the cooking and the cleaning. And immediately this isn't a holiday. She's quite right. She's got this great line about this other woman who's there. They alternate. When Sally J is feeling more upbeat, Missy has gone downhill. Larry passes the time writing corny poetry or painting even cornier pictures. Missy sulks in her room and eats fruit all day. Can't get near it anymore for the cherry stones and plum pits. She's getting so languid, she's just going to melt away in rivulets. There are these Dorothy Parker-esque little lines that really do jump out at you, and they're very enjoyable.
Dorothy Parker's a very good reference point, I think, for the tone. I don't know where she was in terms of talking about sex, but Sally J. Gorse is having a lot of sex, and it's the 1950s, and this was written in the 1950s. And in the first 20 pages, she stumbles into love with this young man who you just mentioned, Larry, who she had met previously in America, and they're sitting having coffee, and he touches her, and she has an orgasm. And it's at that point that you're like, what is did I read that correctly?
So interestingly, I have an orange penguin edition of the book, which I thought, oh, great, lovely, classic edition. And so my one dates from 1961, I think this is. And I had been listening to the book initially on audio. I was driving and I thought, okay, I'll make a start on the audio. And I actually wasn't getting along so well with the audiobook. I really didn't quite get the tone of the character and why I should care about her. But my interest was caught when suddenly, quite early on, she's in this cafe and Larry reaches out to touch her on the hand. She's had a couple of drinks and suddenly it's like this electric shock tingling through her, and she picks up his hand and she's kissing him on the knuckles, and she said, and then I came. And I was like, what?
Exactly.
I just was like, that was unexpected. And I was like, this is a bit much, Pavements of Paris, and the book's barely even started yet. What's going to come? And I was curious. And so then when I switched over to the print copy, which I then much preferred, I felt much more at ease with the details and the character, and I started enjoying it much more when I read it rather than listening to it. Then I was like, did I imagine that? And I flipped back to that section. And in my edition, that little line, and then I came, is not there. And I thought, I must have imagined it. And then I was listening to the Backlisted podcast, who did an episode on Elaine Dundy a few years ago now. Such a brilliant deep dive, as all their episodes are. But they had Sarah Manning on, who was talking about the fact that at the time, Victor Gallant, who published the book, refused to allow that explicit sexual reference to be within the text. And so it was only in more recent modern editions that the reference was reinstated. And it was just fascinating. And I think it really does give you a sense of how cutting edge and how bold this book was for the time. And what an interesting writer Elaine Dundy was. She wasn't playing it safe.
No, not at all. And the whole thing could be very contemporary, right? Like even just if she was from a more traditional family, it would feel subversive. I didn't actually turn down that many pages in my copy, but the one I did turn down had nothing to do with sex. It's about when she's setting up house with Jim, a young artist who she finds out later is astonishingly wealthy, although he likes to pretend he's not. And he wants her to settle down, he wants to get married, and mainly he wants her to cook and clean for him. And he says to her, "You can't cook? Why, good Lord, Sally J. I thought every girl knew how to cook." He looked at me, his little Floridora girl, and gave me a wry sort of "some women are made for only one thing" smile. "Marianne DeWald cooks," he said grimly. "She does all the cooking and looks after 2 kids as well." I tried to remember 1 minute that whole weekend when Marianne and I weren't either feeding people or clearing up from doing it or preparing to do it again. And presumably she never stopped doing it. But I couldn't quite see why, just because she did, I should. Here I was, practically fresh out of the egg. Everything was so new to me. And here was everybody telling me to stop drifting and start living in this world, telling me to start cooking and sewing and cleaning. And I don't know what, taking care of my grandchildren?
She's not having it, is she? And you can't help but love her for that.
She's an astonishing character. And as I say, I think I will like this book more now that I'm out the other side. I just didn't really know where I was going or what the point was. But she does pull it off in the end, I think.
Yeah. There's a scene towards the end with a friend, Judy, who actually is not in robust health when we meet her the first time. And when she comes back the second time, she's got worse and she's been hospitalized. And our fizzing, effervescent, light as a butterfly, don't care about anything, Sally J. Gorse, has to go and visit her. A mutual friend comes and takes her, says, "Judy needs to see you, please come." And so she goes. And that I thought was a very tender, beautiful scene where suddenly she's confronted with illness and something that isn't part of her lovely bubble. It's handled very gracefully and very beautifully. And I think that there are these moments in this book that do feel like they give it real substance and that there is something interesting happening there that stays with you. These are the things that you will remember.
Absolutely. And then, as I mentioned, whether we call it a twist or not, there's a very dark thread woven through this novel that I did not pick up on until it was made explicit. And then, again, all of these hijinks and all of this sexism from men becomes far more sinister than she has been reading it, I would say. Because she's just been having a good time moving through things. Like, you gotta worry about her, but she's coming out okay. But then actually other women aren't, and she's been playing with fire and hasn't even realized it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's that kind of strange thing as well, because I think the thing that really takes away from all of that is this sense that most of the characters in this book are wealthy enough that they can play at being artists or writers and spending all their time in bars and cafes of Paris. There's this real sense of this post-war period where there are still lots of Americans who maybe served and now they're just knocking about the place. There are these references to people wearing slight elements of military clothing, details like that. I love this bit quite early on about, I thought, just this sense of atmosphere and lifestyle. Bradley Slater had been coming in every morning for 2 years in a checkered wool shirt, GI pants and ski boots, copies of Time magazine and the Herald Tribune tucked under his arm. Here he would sit, quite happily until lunchtime, immersed in his reading, getting through a fresh Herald Tribune every day because it was daily, but conscientiously devoting the full 7 days to each issue of Time, as that, after all, was a weekly. After lunch, he retired to his hotel to rest, rising refreshed from his afternoon nap to have a leisurely bath and shave, and showing up spruce and sparkling for his 5:30 reappearance at the Select, where he remained until closing time. And I've written, now there's a way to live your life.
They're basically retired, except they're like 22, 23, 24. I want to say they're having a good time, but it's not how I would want to spend my time necessarily.
Oh, I don't know. And she knew what she was writing about. She spent a year in Paris. So it's full of this real authenticity that makes it very enjoyable. As a book club book, I think it was a fun one to read. It's not one you can really dig deeply into, but we had a good time discussing it. And much like we have just done, just basically sat down and enjoyed going around and pulling out favorite lines.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, it's that kind of book. There aren't necessarily deep depths to plumb, but you want to pull out and laugh and enjoy the anecdotes, the depictions of life at this time. It's interesting because so often books become dated when they really focus on a moment in time. And yet this really has somehow managed to be timeless.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true.
I think I would have been obsessed with this book if I had read it when I was 16. So I just think I would have been absolutely obsessed with it.
Yeah. You could put it on the shelf next to Bonjour Tristesse by François Sagan.
So interesting. Listeners, I wrote Kate a letter, a missive yesterday from San Juan Island, which needs a stamp to be posted. And I compared it to Bonjour Tristesse. I also said, though, it wasn't quite of the same caliber. It's good, but Bonjour Tristesse is, I think, just next level.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I liked over on Goodreads a reviewer called Julie Ehlers. Gave it 5 stars, said the Dud Avocado is like a haphazard cross between F. Scott Fitzgerald and Henry Miller, although funnier than Fitzgerald and less philosophical than Miller. It has young, broke, but not poor white people bumming around Europe, and while the plot isn't happening, there are lots of descriptions of the artistic milieu of Paris and the random debauched nightlife. I thought the heroine Sally J. Gorse was ridiculous, but I wasn't bothered by that or anything else because this book is hilarious, so much more fun than I was expecting. Thanks to Greta Gerwig for getting me to finally read this. And I was intrigued. Greta Gerwig? So I clicked through the link that she had helpfully provided. And I came to this wonderful site, which is called One Grand, which turns out to be a bookshop in upstate New York, where all the books are recommended by different writers, artists, directors, cultural figures. And then this list of recommendations is what feeds into the bookshop's stock. So all I would say is don't go and check out the website unless you have time on your hands, because it is such a rabbit hole you won't want to leave once you're in it. I'll put the link in the show notes. But anyway, there is Greta Gerwig, and in her top 10 is the Dud Avocado. She says, funny, funny, funny. She's wicked and wise. The main character is a total mess and a joy to hang out with. Every page has a great one-liner or quip, and I felt like I never put down my pencil. I kept wanting to underline something, and I thought, I would love to see a Greta Gerwig adaptation of the Dud Avocado.
Yes,
That's a film I would like to watch. So if you're listening, Greta. Meanwhile, just for a bit of balance, Christina gave it 2 stars. This book is good if you like unlikable characters with no depth or storyline. The 1950s speak was charming, but listening to this young, naive, shallow, trust-funded American woman make poor choices in Paris for a year was a real waste of my time. I also had one line that jumped out at me. Sally J. Gorse observes at one point, read? I didn't want to read. It was just a substitute for living. Laura, is that what we've been doing this time? We've
but I don't
reading
think
too much and not living enough.
I don't think I would be comfortable with the level of I'm no Sally J. Gorse. Let's just put it that way. I'm just looking at dear friend Frances Ambler. My favorite books of 2025 was the Dud Avocado. She says, I managed to enjoy this Parisian escapade more the second time around. And I think that's how I would feel too.
Theme of the episode, when you don't read things for plot, then you free yourself.
Kate's new approach to reading.
Plot. Who needs it?
Meanwhile,
Us gets in the way.
I'm on book 5 of Dorothy Dunnett, and it's all just plot. Great writing, but also plot. So not a book club book necessarily, but
I think, listeners, you decide. It depends on the book club. We had a great time around a bowl of guacamole. Also, did you know that you leave the stones of your avocados in the bowl, and then that stops the guac discoloring, going brown?
I did know that, but I always forget. I never do that.
I feel like things in life that everyone knows except me. I was just like, why are the stones in there? And everyone was like, to stop it going brown.
So, a productive book club.
So I think in some ways I have quite a lot in common with Sally J. Gorse. She's always quite surprised by things as well. But yes, lovely one to discuss, and may it have a positive impact on your life, Laura. Maybe it will give you a little bit of joie de vivre. That's nearly it for this episode. You'll find all the books we talked about listed in the show notes, plus links to the bookshop I mentioned, One Grand Books, and the excellent Substack of Laura's friend Frances Ambler. Don't forget to check out the Patreon for ad-free episodes, extra episodes, the Pod Book Club, and read-alongs. In subscribing, you're supporting me financially, and you're helping me to believe that people value the pod, which means a lot. And to all the pod subscribers, thank you so much for being there. A particular welcome to Remy, Alison, and Diane, who joined recently. But for now, thanks for listening, and I wish you all happy reading.
With Verbal's last-minute deals, you can save over $50 on your spring getaway. So whether it's a mountain escape with friends, a family week at the beach, or sightseeing in a new city, there's still time to get great discounts. Book your next stay now. Average savings $72. Select homes only.